There is a particular kind of December evening that makes a diner feel like the warmest place in the world. Snow falling steadily outside the windows, the streetlights catching it, the whole world softened and quieted by the accumulation of white. Inside, the booths are red vinyl and the coffee is hot, and the smell of pancakes is enough to make a person feel, at least for the duration of a meal, that everything is exactly as it should be. It was on an evening exactly like that one, 3 days before Christmas, that a woman named Elaine Whitmore stood in the doorway of Henderson's Diner on the corner of Maple and 4th, still in her coat and green scarf, scanning a restaurant that was fuller than she had expected for a Tuesday night in a snowstorm. The only available seat in the entire establishment appeared to be the empty chair at a corner booth occupied by a man and a young girl, who were spreading what looked like letters across the table between their pancakes and coffee cups. She almost left. The cafe 2 blocks down probably had room and was considerably quieter. But the snow outside had picked up in the last 20 minutes. Her coat was already damp through the shoulders. The man in the corner booth had kind eyes, and the girl, perhaps 10 years old, brown hair and 2 loose braids, was laughing at something, the sound carrying across the diner with the particular brightness of a child who was entirely comfortable and entirely happy. Elaine found herself walking toward the booth before she had quite decided to. "Excuse me," she said, stopping a respectful distance from the table. "Every other table is taken. Would you mind if I sat here? I won't be any trouble. I'll just have coffee and leave you to whatever you're working on." The man looked up. The girl looked up. They both looked at her for a moment, and then the girl turned to her father with an expression of clear, unmistakable enthusiasm. "Can she sit with us, Dad?" His name was Marcus Hale. He was 37, a widowed single father raising his 10-year-old daughter, Lily, in a small house on the east side of the city, where he worked as a 6th-grade science teacher at Washington Middle School and spent his evenings and weekends managing, with the particular patient creativity of someone who has learned to work within real constraints, the demands of a life built almost entirely around the well-being of one small person. He had dark, slightly unruly hair and a beard that suggested the last 2 weeks before Christmas break rather than deliberate cultivation, and he wore a worn green canvas jacket over a dark sweater and jeans, the kind of unremarkable, practical clothes that suggested a person who had stopped thinking about what he was wearing and hadn't started again. The letters spread across the table, Elaine noticed as she settled into the offered chair, were clearly from children, crayon-heavy, some with drawings in the margins, a few in more careful handwriting suggesting older kids. They were all addressed to something called the Lighthouse Fund. "Of course," Marcus said, moving a stack of envelopes to make room. "Sorry about the mess. Tuesday evenings we grade our letters." "We don't grade them," Lily corrected seriously. "We read them. Grading is a whole different thing." "She's right," Marcus said. "We read them." Elaine ordered her coffee and let the natural warmth of the booth settle around her, a little self-conscious about the intrusion, but also, she had to admit, immediately comfortable in a way that sharing a table with strangers did not usually produce. "What is the Lighthouse Fund?" she asked, gesturing toward the envelopes, because it seemed rude not to acknowledge what was spread across half the table. Marcus and Lily exchanged a look that seemed to carry some shared understanding. "It's a program at the school where I teach," Marcus said. "We run a pen-pal exchange between our 6th graders and kids at the children's hospital across town, the long-term inpatients. It started small, just my classroom, but it's grown over the years. The kids write every 2 weeks, the hospital kids write back when they're able, and we read them together to make sure nothing needs a response before the next round goes out." "He started it 4 years ago," Lily said, with the particular pride of a child whose parent has done something she considers genuinely impressive. "When I had to go to the hospital for a whole month, and there was nothing to do, and nobody wrote to me except Dad." She said this with complete matter-of-factness, the way children describe events that were difficult but have been sufficiently processed that they've become simply facts rather than wounds. "The hospital was boring," she added, "and lonely, even with Dad there. I was there every day," Marcus said. "But a 10-year-old needs more than just her father for company. That's what I understood. After that month, I went back to school and started the program." Elaine looked at the envelopes spread across the table, perhaps 30 of them, different sizes, different handwriting, many decorated with drawings of improbable complexity given the circumstances under which they'd presumably been made. How many children does the program reach? She asked. At the hospital, currently about 40 regular correspondents, Marcus said. Some have been in the program 2 or 3 years. It's a long-term ward. Childhood cancer, chronic illness, complex recovery cases. The kids there cycle slowly. Some come home, some don't. He said the last 3 words simply, without flinching, the particular directness of someone who has worked alongside difficult realities long enough to name them without needing to soften them. From the school side, my classroom plus 3 others now. About 90 students total. We train them at the start of the year. How to write to someone who's sick, what to say and what not to say, how to be a real friend on paper to someone you've never met. That's remarkable, Elaine said. It's just letters, Marcus said. Things that aren't complicated are often the most remarkable, she said. He looked at her for a moment, as if reassessing the direction the conversation had taken, and then smiled. A real one, slightly surprised, the kind that arrives when someone says something unexpected and genuinely true. She stayed considerably longer than she had planned. The coffee became a second coffee, and then the pancakes Lily recommended with great authority arrived, and the letters got sorted, and the 3 of them fell into the easy, unhurried conversation that sometimes happens between strangers in warm places when the snow outside makes the rest of the world temporarily inaccessible and there's nowhere urgent to be. She learned that Lily was in 5th grade and deeply interested in marine biology, with opinions about the classification of dolphins more developed than Elaine's own. She learned that Marcus had been teaching for 12 years, had grown up in the same city, that Lily's mother had passed away when Lily was 3, and that the month Lily spent in the hospital 4 years ago had been the worst month of his life, followed closely by the month of figuring out how to keep it from happening again. What was wrong with her? Elaine asked gently, because it seemed like information Marcus was comfortable with rather than something she was extracting. A rare inflammatory condition, Marcus said. She's been in remission for 3 years. She gets monitored regularly. So far, so good. So far, so good, Lily repeated, with the breezy confidence of someone who has heard the assessment often enough to have fully adopted it as her own. What Elaine did not say, across the entire evening, was anything about herself. Not her name beyond the first. She'd introduced herself simply as Elaine when she sat down, while Marcus had introduced himself and Lily, no last names exchanged. Not her work, not the particular shape of a life so utterly different from the corner booth and the red vinyl and the letters from hospitalized children spread across the table. Elaine Whitmore was 41. She was the founder and chief executive of Whitmore Health Initiatives, a philanthropic organization she'd established 8 years earlier with a substantial portion of a technology investment exit that had arrived when she was 33, leaving her, in the way sudden financial change often does, temporarily uncertain what to do with herself before gradually finding the things she actually cared about. Whitmore Health Initiatives focused on pediatric health access and patient experience, with particular emphasis on programs supporting long-term pediatric inpatients, the children who fell between the gaps of acute care, too sick to go home, but stable enough that the hospital's acute attention had moved elsewhere, who spent months in wards where the primary challenge was not medical but human. 4 years earlier, reviewing grant applications for a new round of patient experience funding, Elaine had come across a proposal from a 6th grade science teacher at Washington Middle School, describing a pen pal program he'd started after his daughter's hospitalization and requesting a modest amount of funding for stationery, postage, and materials to expand it to other classrooms. The proposal was, by the standards of the grants she reviewed, unremarkable in its presentation. No professional grant writer had shaped it, no glossy materials accompanied it. The budget was almost apologetically small. But what it contained, in the body of its 3-page description, was a precise articulation of what long-term pediatric inpatients actually needed, something most hospital programs entirely missed. Not activities, not events, not visitors, continuity. Consistent, reliable personal connection with the same person over weeks and months, building something that felt like a genuine relationship rather than a charitable gesture. She had funded it immediately and in full, more than the request, and had continued funding it every year since, anonymously, through the Foundation's standard blind grant process. She had never known the teacher's name. The paperwork had been submitted under the school's umbrella, processed through the district's grants coordinator, and Elaine's foundation had received annual reports but no personal correspondence. She had, for 4 years, funded a program she now understood to be the stack of envelopes on the table in front of her, run by the man across the booth, because of a daughter who was currently debating with her whether dolphins were more like people than most people admitted. She did not say any of this. They parted at the diner's door 2 hours after she'd arrived, the snow still falling, Lily bundled back into her coat with the efficient speed of a child who has learned that adults take twice as long as necessary to leave anywhere. "It was lovely to meet you," Elaine said, and meant it in a way the phrase didn't generally carry. "Likewise," Marcus said. "I hope the rest of your December is less snowy." "I hope the program keeps growing," she said. "The letters." He looked at her with the slight, pleasant puzzlement of someone not quite sure how the conversation had landed where it did. "It will," he said. "It always does." She walked out into the snow, turned her collar up, and stood for a moment on the sidewalk while the cold settled back around her. She had his school. She had his name. She had, as of that evening, considerably more context for the annual report she'd been reading for 4 years than she'd possessed before walking into Henderson's diner to get out of the snow. She also had, she was honest enough to admit to herself, about 2 minutes of standing in the cold before she went back in, because she had forgotten to leave her card on the table. She had not, in fact, forgotten her card. Marcus found it the next morning, tucked under the edge of the syrup dispenser, where it had apparently been left. A plain cream-colored business card with a name and a title and a foundation name that he stared at for a long time before setting his coffee down and reading it again. He recognized the foundation name immediately. He'd been writing them thank you letters through the district's grants coordinator for 4 years. He sat at the kitchen table for a while. Lily, eating cereal across from him, noticed. "What's that?" "A card," he said. "From the woman at the diner last night. The one who knew about dolphins." "That one," he said. He turned the card over. On the back, in a neat, decisive hand, "The Lighthouse Fund is the best proposal I've read in 8 years. Please call if you'd like to talk about expanding it properly." Lily, who had leaned across the table to read this, straightened up with an expression of complete satisfaction. "I told you she was nice." "You said she knew about dolphins," Marcus said. "That's the same thing," Lily said, and went back to her cereal. He called the following week, after Christmas, when school was out and Lily was at her grandmother's for 2 days, and the house was quiet enough to think clearly. The conversation lasted an hour and a half. They talked about the program, about what an expansion might actually look like, and, gradually, without either of them quite steering it there, about the month Lily had spent in the hospital and what Marcus had understood afterward about what children in that situation actually needed. "You wrote in the proposal," Elaine said, "that the thing that helped her most wasn't the nurses or the activities coordinator or the get-well cards from her class. It was one specific friend from school who wrote to her every single week. The same person, the same voice, for the entire month. Emma Carrillo," Marcus said. "She's in 8th grade now. She and Lily still write letters sometimes, actual paper letters. That's what the whole program is built on. One specific relationship," Elaine said. "Not a program. A person." "Yes," Marcus said. "That's exactly it." A pause. "I read that proposal 4 years ago," Elaine said, "and it was the first time, in 8 years of philanthropic work, that I'd read anything that actually described the problem correctly. Most proposals describe the absence of activities. Yours described the absence of consistent human connection. Those are completely different problems, with completely different solutions." "It's just what I saw," Marcus said. "I'm a teacher. I'm used to watching kids. What I watched Lily need that month wasn't more to do. It was someone specific who was going to keep showing up." The program expanded over the following year to 3 hospitals, 6 school districts, and an online correspondence component that extended its reach to homebound pediatric patients who couldn't access a hospital writing program at all. The expansion was funded substantially by Whitmore Health Initiatives and designed collaboratively by Elaine and Marcus, over a series of working meetings that were scheduled professionally and ran consistently somewhat longer than their agendas strictly required. Lily, kept informed of developments with the matter-of-fact transparency Marcus applied to most things in their household, registered the expansion with satisfaction, and the growing frequency of the meetings with a separate, more particular satisfaction that she expressed mainly through meaningful looks at her grandmother, who shared them. She came and sat at our table in the snow, Lily said, about 8 months after Henderson's diner, to her grandmother, as a complete explanation of a situation she considered essentially self-evident. She did, her grandmother agreed. And she funded the letters for 4 years without even knowing it was us. Remarkable coincidence, her grandmother said. It's not a coincidence, Lily said. It's because good people find each other eventually. It just sometimes takes a blizzard. And perhaps that is the gentle truth tucked inside a snowy December evening like this one. That the good we do quietly, without expectation of recognition or return, has a way of traveling further than we imagine, and of finding its way back to us in forms we never anticipated. A teacher who started a letter-writing program because his daughter was lonely. A philanthropist who funded it because it described something true. A snowstorm that put them in the same booth. A child who looked up from a letter and said simply, "Can she sit with us?" Sometimes the most important connections begin with nothing more complicated than an empty chair and the willingness to offer it.